I never figured dynamite for a wake-up call, but there it was, ripping through the frozen air of Dust Ridge like the devil himself had lit the fuse. It was the winter of 1883, and that god-forsaken mining town, hacked right into the spine of the Rockies, was already a powder keg waiting to blow. The blast came from the saloon. Some fool claimed Jumper tampering with explosives to settle a score, or maybe just dumb luck gone sideways. Either way, it shook the rafters, splintered tables, and sent shards of glass flying like angry hornets. I was in the thick of it. Wyatt Harlan, blood trickling from a gash on my forehead, my fists raw from pounding the face of the bastard who'd dared spit on my past. "Your woman's fever took her easy, Harlan," he'd sneered, whiskey breath hot on my neck. "And that kid of yours? Burned up like kindling. Reckon you're next." I didn't think twice. My right hook connected with his jaw, cracking like a whip in the chaos. Men scattered as the fight spilled into the street, snow churning under our boots. He drew first, a rusty Colt glinting under the lantern light. But I was faster, always had been. The shot echoed off the mountains, his bullet grazing my coat sleeve before mine found his shoulder. He howled, crumpling into the drifts, but not before his pals joined the fray. 3 of them, shadows in the storm, guns blazing. I rolled behind a barrel, heart pounding like a war drum, firing back with the precision of a man who'd stared death down too many times. One went down clutching his leg, another fled into the alley. The third? He got away, but not without a promise in his eyes. Revenge, the kind that festers in these wild parts. By the time the sheriff hauled the wounded off, I was stumbling home, the taste of blood and gunpowder thick on my tongue. Dust Ridge wasn't much. A cluster of weathered shacks clinging to the hillside, days smothered in coal dust that turned your spit black, nights alive with winds that howled like lost souls scratching at your door. The mountains loomed over it all, unforgiving giants that swallowed men whole and spat out their bones. I'd come here years ago, chasing silver veins that promised fortune, but all I found was more emptiness. Once I had a life worth living, Clara, my wife, with her laugh that could melt snow, and our boy Samuel, all wide eyes and sticky grins, chasing tumbleweeds like they were wild ponies. But fate's a cruel bitch in the West. Clara went first, the fever hitting her like a prairie fire, hot, relentless, gone in days. I held her as she slipped away, her hand cold in mine, whispering promises I couldn't keep. Then Samuel, barely 6, sent to the orphanage in the next valley for safekeeping while I grieved. A fire raised it to ashes one stormy night, the telegram arriving like a gut punch, presumed lost. No body, no grave, just 2 words that hollowed me out. Words abandoned me after that. I spoke only when the mind demanded it. Grunts to the foreman, nods to the barkeep. Dawn came too early. Me choking down cold jerky by lantern light, then descending into the earth's belly, pickaxe swinging as if I could dig my way out of the pain. Evenings, I'd collapse in my drafty cabin, the air thick with pine smoke and the ghost of regret. Under my bunk sat a hand-whittled wooden pony, its flanks worn smooth from Samuel's tiny hands. I couldn't bear to touch it, but I couldn't toss it either. Some nights, when the gale whipped through the cracks, I'd swear I heard his giggles riding the wind, a sweet, slicing torment that kept the wound fresh. That night, after the saloon mess, I trudged through the snow, boots crunching like breaking bones. The cold bit deep, but it was nothing compared to the fire in my veins. I'd made enemies, sure, claimed jumpers like those vermin didn't forget a humiliation, but solitude was my armor, or so I thought, until the knock came. 3 sharp raps on my door, cutting through the howl. I ignored it at first, figuring it for the wind or some drunk miner, but then a voice, "Wyatt Harlan, open up. It's Pastor Thorne. I wouldn't bother you if it weren't dire." I cracked the door, the chill rushing in like an unwelcome guest. There stood Thorne, bundled in his wool coat, snow dusting his beard like flour on a baker's apron. Beside him, a woman, tall, with fierce eyes that caught the moonlight like steel traps. Her coat was threadbare, gloved hands clutching a battered satchel, but she held her chin high, no tremble in her stance. "This here's Abigail Reed," Thorne said, his breath fogging the air. "Stagecoach from Denver got hit by bandits. They took her purse, her papers, everything. Inns full up with trappers, and my sister's broods got my place bursting. She's got nowhere, Wyatt, and you know, loss. You know what the cold can do to a soul." I eyed her. This Abigail. She didn't flinch under my glare, didn't simper or plead, just met my gaze steady, like a loaded revolver ready to fire. "I can sleep by the fire," she said, voice low and even, carrying that eastern lilt softened by hardship. "Won't be no bother. Just till morning." Thorne nodded eagerly, his eyes pleading. I grumbled something about fools and their charity, but the truth? Something in her eyes tugged at the ragged edges of my heart, a flicker of the resilience I'd lost. I stepped aside, the door creaking like old bones. "Fire's low," I muttered. "Wood's in the corner." She slipped inside without a word, her boots leaving wet prints on the floorboards. Kneeling by the hearth, she stacked logs with practiced hands, struck a match, and coaxed flames to life. Warmth spread slow, chasing shadows into the corners, and for the first time in 3 long years, 2 breaths filled that cabin. Not lovers, not family, just 2 battered souls circling each other like wary wolves. I slumped into my chair, watching her unpack a thin blanket and a worn book, her movements efficient, no fuss. She sat cross-legged by the fire, lips moving silently as she read, the glow painting her face in soft gold. I didn't speak. Neither did she. But the silence wasn't empty anymore. It hummed with possibility, or maybe just the crackle of logs. Sleep came fitful that night, dreams tangled with Clara's fevered whispers and Samuel's laughter echoing in the flames. Morning slunk in gray and reluctant, the fire still smoldering thanks to her tending. I stirred, back aching from the chair, and there she was in the kitchen nook, shifting a pot over the stove. The smell hit me. Strong coffee. Real and earthy. Not the watered-down sludge I brewed. "Found the beans tucked away," she said without turning, pouring into a tin mug. "Hope you don't mind." I grunted, taking the cup, the heat seeping through my calloused fingers. It tasted like memories. Clara used to make it just like this before everything went to hell. We sat in silence, but it was the kind that didn't demand filling, just let us be. I headed to the mine after, steps heavier than usual, not from the cold but from the quiet she'd planted in my mind. The shaft was a black maw, swallowing me whole, the air thick with dust, and the clang of picks. The men shot glances my way. Old Hank, the grizzled foreman with his missing fingers, muttered about the saloon scrap. "Heard you tangled with the McGraw boys, Harlan. Watch your back. They're mean as rattlers." I shrugged it off, but the words stuck like burrs. By dusk, I trudged home, expecting the empty chill. Instead, the cabin glowed warm, floor swept, my boots polished by the door, coat hung straight, supper simmered, venison stew, hearty and spice just right. Abigail nodded as I entered, then bent back to mending a tear in my shirt sleeve. "Don't gotta do that," I said, voice rough from disuse. "I know," she replied, needle flashing in the lamplight. Her eyes flicked up, holding mine a beat too long, stirring something deep and forgotten. That evening Pastor Thorne came knocking again, hat in hand, words tumbling awkward. "Sister's family's still crammed in," he said. "No word from the school in Silverton, no spot for Miss Reed yet. And the inn? Well, they're turning away strangers on account of the bandit raids." He glanced at the fire, then lowered his voice. "Folks are talking, Wyatt, about her staying here." Unwed and all, I nodded once, the weight of judgment settling like fresh snow. Later, Abigail sat by the table, stitching quietly. I paced the room, the floorboards groaning under my boots. Finally, she set down the cloth. "We should talk," she said, voice even but laced with steel. I stopped, mid-stride. "I know this ain't what you signed on for," she continued, meeting my eyes. "I'm a woman with no coin, no kin in these parts. Town like this don't take kindly to that. Whispers turn to stones quick." She paused, folding her hands. "I'm not begging charity. I'm proposing a deal. Marriage, legal, simple. No strings beyond. You get a kept house. I get a roof. Quiet's the talk." The words hung there, heavy as a loaded gun. I sat across from her, staring into the flames. Marriage? After Clara, the thought twisted like a knife. But there was logic in it, cold and practical, like surviving a blizzard. And beneath that, a spark. Her presence had already thawed the ice around my heart, making the cabin feel less like a tomb. After a long beat, I said, "We'll see Thorne at dawn." She nodded, no smile, just a quiet acceptance. The silence shifted then, from stranger's unease to something charged, like the air before thunder. We married the next morning in Thorne's parlor, frost-etching lace patterns on the windows, the fire crackling solemn. I stood stiff in my best coat, coal stains faint on my hands. Abigail wore a simple gray dress, pressed neat, her hair pinned back. She reached out, straightening my collar with gentle fingers. "That'll do," she murmured. her touch sending a jolt through me. Warm, unexpected. Thorne read the vows, his voice steady, knowing this was more contract than romance. I said I do first, voice gravelly. She followed, steady as ever. No rings of gold or flowers, just my grandma's plain band, slipping onto her finger like it belonged. Her hand lingered in mine a moment, soft against my roughness, and I felt a pull, deep and unspoken. Thorne's wife offered cider, but we didn't touch it. We walked home slow, shoulders brushing in the slush, folks watching from porches, old Widow Hayes with her judgmental squint, young Billy the stable boy gawking open-mouthed. "It'll blow over," Abigail said quietly. "They'll find fresh meat to chew on." "They always do," I replied, my voice softening at her nearness. Back in the cabin, everything felt shifted. She hung her coat beside mine, our breaths mingling in the warm air. That night, she took the back room with its crooked window overlooking the pines. I stayed by the fire, but sleep evaded me, thoughts swirling with her scent. Lavender and wood smoke, stirring embers I'd thought long dead. The days fell into a rhythm, respectful and quiet. She'd cook, biscuits fluffy as clouds, stew that warmed to the bone. I'd chop wood, stack it neat, fixing leaks without a word. One evening she left a book open on the table, a tale of a frontiersman searching for his lost kin. I didn't comment, but I didn't move it either. Her insights crept in slow, stirring my buried grief without force. February clamped down hard, the cold turning everything brittle. The trees, the mines, even us folks. The shafts groaned under ice, and I pushed harder, longer hours to outrun the ache in my soul. My shoulder twinged from old fights, hand trembling when I gripped the pick, but I hit it, like always. Then the blizzard hit, a ferocious beast roaring down the mountains. I was on the trail home, visibility nil, snow lashing like whips. That's when they came. Shadows in the whiteout, outlaws tipped off by those saloon rats seeking payback. "Harlan!" One bellowed, voice cutting the wind. Guns cracked, bullets zipping past my ear. I dove into a drift, drawing my revolver, heart thundering. The storm was my ally and foe, blinding them as much as me. I fired blind, hearing a yelp as one fell. Another charged, his face a snarling mask. I rolled, shooting low, grazing his leg. The third got close, knife gleaming, but my boot caught his gut, sending him sprawling. A final shot echoed and silence fell, broken only by the wind. I staggered home, a graze on my arm burning like fire, blood soaking my sleeve. Suspicion festered. Who'd sold me out? But as I pushed open the door, Abigail's worried eyes met mine, and for the first time, the pain felt shared. She patched me up without questions, her hand steady on my skin, the touch igniting sparks I couldn't ignore. "Yeah, you could have died out there," she whispered, voice cracking just a hair. "But I didn't," I said, catching her wrist gently. Our eyes locked, the air thick with unspoken longing. In that moment, amid the storm's remnants, I felt the first crack in my armored heart. A pull toward her that promised healing, if only I'd let it. The mind called me back too soon, but the dangers lingered. Whispers in the shafts spoke of sabotage, claim jumpers eyeing our veins. Hank pulled me aside one shift, his face lined with worry. "Watch yourself, Wyatt. Them McGraws ain't done. Heard they're rustlin' tools, settin' traps." I nodded, but the weight pressed heavier. Abigail noticed my strain, her eyes searching mine over supper. "You're hurtin'," she said softly, not just meaning the wound. "Just tired," I lied, but her hand on my arm said she knew better. That night, as the wind howled, I lay awake, thoughts of her mingling with ghosts of Clara and Samuel. Love? It was a fool's game in these parts, but Abigail's presence was chipping away at my resolve, promising a warmth I hadn't felt in years. The cold deepened, minds turning treacherous with every freeze-thaw cycle. I pushed my limits, body aching from endless shifts, hidden pains flaring like old embers. One day, deep in the shaft, a timber groaned ominous. "Rigged, I reckoned, by those outlaws," I shouted, warning to the crew, diving as it collapsed in a roar of dust and rock. Pain exploded in my ribs, shoulder wrenching, but I clawed free, coughing blood. The foreman sent word. Thorne and Hank hauled me home on a makeshift stretcher. Abigail flung open the door, face pale but composed. "Get him inside," she commanded, clearing the bed, boiling water without a tear.